Welcome, everyone.
Morning.
Sorry for the delay, but hopefully everybody can get a little coffee while we're waiting for the few minutes. Yeah, apologies. Like Chad said, we kind of adjusted. We had quite a few talks, and the content is kind of scattered amongst some of the talks. And this is kind of one of the things that we had been working on. We had some content together, and we thought that it would be kind of helpful for people and informative for people, and something that we don't really see in terms of talks and things like that. So essentially what this talk is about is how you could potentially use a Swift CLI tool, or build a Swift CLI tool to augment what you may do in shell scripts. And as I get this set up, I'll give you a few examples of why that may be helpful, but here we go. So yeah, we're Electrona. We have a few team members here. Very much appreciate you joining us here. We do many things. We're an MSP. We make a few products, one being an Electrona patch, one being an Electrona migrator. We have several kind of services that we can provide in terms of MSP services. We do professional services. We work on things, that is so bright on my eyes, on behalf of Jamf. So we could do onboardings and things like that with Jamf as well. So yeah, this talk, again, is about Swift CLI and how you can kind of augment what you may do in your shell scripts using Swift. We're not going to be learning Swift here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you examples. I'm going to give you files. We're going to construct the app. There's a lot of stuff that goes into, or the command line tool. There's a lot of things that go into the command line tool other than just code. So we're going to talk about setting up the plist inside it, things like versioning, how you can kind of do that in a more efficient manner, and things like that. So the challenge is build a Swift CLI tool for macOS that makes shell scripting easier. One of the things that kind of, when I was being introduced to Swift, is I really like to see examples of things. So I Google for example of something, and it's, every example that I get was something about iOS, and the stuff in terms of Swift related to macOS is pretty minimal. So my idea was, okay, let's see if I can give an example and explain the code as we go through it. Not necessarily write code, because that's not you're going to kind of get into that if you're kind of introing Swift CLI or Swift UI, which I have to talk about later. You're not going to be able to learn Swift in 60 minutes, but you may be able to take an example and kind of modify that for your needs and learn based off that example. So I'm hopefully going to give you some cool examples on how you can do that. But why? So why if you can do it in Bash or Shell and you have it in a script, why would you want to potentially do something else in Swift? And I'll give you a few examples. So one of these examples, you probably have seen this. I assume you probably can tell what this is. Anybody know what this is doing?
Getting the currently logged in user.
Yeah, probably the first word of that is going to give it away, but this is one method of doing that. Yeah, get the logged in user. What about this? Same thing. You're good. You're good. You're good. So this is something that caused a lot of folks issues where people, there's kind of a, hey, here's a command to get, this is the best command to get the logged in user at that time, and it just so happened to be Python. And then macOS, I guess it was Monterey, I think it's 12.3 dropped, and then Python's gone. And everybody's, everybody who kind of didn't necessarily have all the technical abilities to do scripting, that maybe got scripts from somewhere or something like that, they're like, hey, I don't know kind of what to do here, and how do I adjust this? Here's another version. Get the logged in user, kind of a different way to do it. Here's yet another way, slightly adjusted. So kind of the idea is, how can you take something like this and make it easier? Who in the world could remember any one of those ways? It's like what you're going to be doing most likely is copy and pasting from one script to another, because otherwise you're never going to be able to recall that particular line, even the first one, which was pretty straightforward. So the idea is, okay, let's make something much more memorable, much easier, and just more concise, something much shorter. So that's the idea. So the software you may need, if you don't have Xcode, you're going to be kind of screwed because it's going to take you like an hour probably to install it. But it's okay. We'll get you the slides afterwards. We'll get you some files as well, so you can do it later if you want. We're going to use a tool called Swift Argument Parser, which is made by Apple, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. Basically, it's a package that you can install or add to your Swift CLI app or Swift CLI tool to make parsing of commands easier. You can, just like in Bash, Python, whatever, you can take in parameters and you can parse those yourself. You can construct a mechanism to parse commands. But this makes it much easier. So this is what we're going to do. It also lets you define the command structure, and I'll show you how that works. It automatically provisions the help flag. So as you build out the commands, you can customize the help if you want, but this is going to create the help for you automatically, which is cool. It's maintained by Apple, so it's pretty good. Yeah, it is good. So here, you'll probably want to go to this link. This is basically going to take you right to Swift Argument Parser link in GitHub, which we're going to use in a little bit if you want to go through the building of the app, or the command line tool, rather. And ultimately, what we need is just the URL of the repo, which this will take you right to it. I'll leave that up for a second in case anybody needs that. It's a very well-maintained code base, lots of contributors, again, maintained by Apple. So it's not log4j and going to get you in trouble in a little while. Everybody get that? I can go back. There we go. Yep.
Posted on the PSU Mac 205 channel too.
Oh, cool. All right. So yeah, essentially what we're going to do is create the default command line tool. It's pretty straightforward. You choose, when you create a new Xcode project, you choose macOS-Chad at the top, command line tool. Again, pretty straightforward. You're going to name the product. In this case, I'm naming it, hopefully you can see that pretty well, PSU CLI. And you can name it whatever you want, but this is short and sweet, and I want things to be more concise, so this is good. Language Swift, obviously. And once you get that created, you basically are going to have the default command line tool. And the way that you can actually test this is there's kind of a play button. In my other talk, I kind of added like a zoom to this play button. Hopefully you can see in the kind of the top of the sidebar there. Little build button. You can also do Command B. If for some reason you like shortcuts, Command B will build that. We like shortcuts. So basically what this is kind of the Hello World app. You build the app, and it's going to, or you build the command line tool, and it's going to print out Hello World. Pretty simple. But also like doesn't help you if you're kind of just getting into Swift. This is what that looks like if you couldn't see that. Very short and sweet. It's the main.swift. And it's aptly named main because that's the entry point of the command line tool, which we're actually going to adjust once we get Swift argument parser set up. But yeah, by default, main.swift, and it's the main entry point of the command line tool. So first off, we're going to add the Swift argument parser package to the CLI tool. And there's quite a few ways you can do this in terms of presenting it. I chose to go with a certain way. And I'm kind of I don't want to say like a savant at Keynote, but I'm pretty good. And here's kind of an example of that. So essentially what you're going to do is right-click this sidebar here. And then there's an Add Package Dependency option in that menu. And then you'll get to a page that looks something like this. That link for the GitHub repo that I mentioned, if you copy that, paste that into the upper right there, it should kind of populate the screen like you can see on the screen. And you can kind of read a little bit about it here, but essentially that's data that's taken straight from the repo and is shown to you in the window. And then once you're ready, you should be able to add that package. And then you'll see another screen where you essentially can see where that dependency is going to be added. And what we want, which should be by default what you're seeing, is for that target, which is our product, we're going to add argument parser as a dependency to that product. So as we add package, what you should see in the left sidebar is the Swift argument parser package added to the bottom. You can't expand that. You can kind of see all the files related to that. But there are a lot, so I didn't want to do that. But yeah, essentially now we have Swift argument parser added to the command line tool. We're not leveraging it yet, obviously, but we'll do that. What you have with the app is you have a plist in the app. So if you try to get a version of an app, typically you're reading the plist that's bundled in the app. Usually it's a CF bundle short version string, which is what is, I'm pretty sure what, if you use Jamf Pro, is what inventory uses, unless you're using some sort of extension attribute. But and we'll get to that particular key here in a little bit as well. But what we want to actually do is embed an info.plist into the binary. So the binary typically is just one file. What you actually do is create an info.plist and bundle it into the binary. And the reason why we want to do that, I'll show you. But it's kind of a cool added step. So a lot of times people will have a variable that has version equals 1.0 somewhere in the code base. And every time they perform an update, they have to iterate that version, which is just kind of, someone's going to forget for sure. Each time they make a change, they're not going to change that one variable. So we want to avoid that. So the way that you add a plist to the file, again, right-click that sidebar. There's add files to the product, which is PSU CLI in this case. And you'll see a window that looks something like this. You can filter that in the upper right. You can just type in property. But you're going to find under the resource section, there's property list. And we'll choose that. And this is also how you can add, if you want to add a new Swift file, for some reason you want to add an Objective-C file to the app, you can do that here as well. But we're going to use property list for plist. You name it, you want to name that info.plist. And by default, you should see it being added to the PSU CLI target. So if that's not checked, you're basically just going to create a file that's not linked to anything, which in some cases may be okay if it's some sort of resource for the app or the command line tool that you want to copy in some location via post install on a package or something. But in this case, we're gonna add that to the target. And then you'll see kind of in the sidebar now, not only do we have Swift argument parser, but you can see our new info, it's the plist. And now what you're going to do is if you click on the app logo in the sidebar, we can get to some of the settings. We'll choose the target, which is kind of in the middle pane. And then in the general section, we want to essentially associate that plist that we just created with the command line tool. And you can do that with the choose info.plist file button there. And it's going to allow you to choose that info.plist in this screen. And then now it's actually kind of weird. Sometimes you may have to click out of the general tab, like click on signing and capabilities, and then back to general. But in that section where we chose the plist, you'll now see some blank fields for bundle, identifier, version, and build. So typically when you would create your command line tool, this is where you want to maintain the version. You don't want to have to go into the code base and switch some version there. This is how you would do it with an app. So we want to kind of maintain that same experience with our command line tool as well. So here we're specifying the version as 1.0. It could be whatever you want. And so what we're going to do is we're going to embed this version in our info.plist, and we can use that in a command to get the version of the app. So now what we want to do is we want to add that property to the plist. So if you click on the plist file in your left-hand sidebar, you can kind of see it kind of provides a okay GUI. It's kind of slightly complicated, but essentially this is where you can add properties to that plist. I think maybe by default the bundle ID is in there. If not, you can select it. This is power of Keynote here. We're going to add with this. And you should get a screen that looks something like this, where you can basically, boom. If you search for bundle version, you can add bundle version string short, which is that CF bundle version string, or CF bundle short version string. And then over on the side, Xcode has like 1 billion variables that you can use within the product. And in this case, this marketing version tracks to the version field that we just populated in the info.plist. So essentially, as we maintain the version of the product, that new version is going to be embedded in the info.plist, and we're going to use that in a command to get the version. So things like I don't know, JQ -- version. It's going to give you the version of JQ. It's pretty universal in terms of how you would get the version. We want to do the same thing. And then the next step is again, if you go to the app icon in the left sidebar, again, choose targets like we did before, choose PSU CLI. And instead of general section where we modified the info.plist, you go to build settings, and then you can filter that because there's a ton of build settings that you can configure for create info. And then you'll see there's an option to essentially embed that info.plist in the binary. And you want to change that from no to yes. And this is actually something I contributed. If anybody knows DocuTil, I think a year or two ago it was converted from, I think it was Python to Swift. And the way, I forget the gentleman's name, the way he was maintaining the version was with a variable with 3.1 or whatever it was. And so I contributed this to that repo to essentially make it to where he can manage the version the way that kind of makes more sense, the way you're not going to forget, rather than a variable that you may need to update that you might forget. So we've not yet done any code, but we should have a command line tool that runs. And we have Swift argument parser added. We have the foundation of like getting the version kind of more efficiently. Any questions so far? I'm really wanting Chad to just hit somebody with this thing.
Are you going to do a separate presentation on your keynote skills?
I can, yeah. There's more. Don't worry. Okay. So, what about the code? Again, as I talked about, the likelihood that you're going to learn a ton about Swift in 60 minutes is relatively low. But I think providing you with examples for me is super beneficial when I see an example and someone can explain what we're doing. And then again, you're going to be able to take kind of what we've done here and adapt it for, even if it's not for this use case, if you want to build a Swift CLI tool that does something completely different, you can do that. So what I've done is I've bundled a few of the files that you're going to need. What I didn't want to do is just give you the project, because then you could just leave after that. And if you want to leave now, that's fine. But what we really want to do is kind of go through these files and set things up together. So here you should be able to get some zip file that contains I think it's 4 Swift files. And I'll leave this up for a minute. And what you probably want to do is, once you get that downloaded, it's very, very small. Unzip that and just keep that handy. Maybe navigate into that directory where those zip files or the Swift files are and just keep those handy. And I'll leave this up for a second.
It's also in the channel if you want to click on it.
All right. So in order to use Swift argument parser, there's a lot of ways to skin a cat, which is actually a horrible analogy, but a lot of ways to do this. So basically what we want to do is we want to rename that main file. Again, I mentioned that's the entry point of the command line tool. And we want to kind of modify that when we add Swift argument parser. So this is, once you rename this file, you can rename it to whatever you want. It just makes sense to me to rename it to psucli.swift. And you should be able to just click on main and then add psucli to the name.
You lost your mic.
Really? Testing? No?
He says he's got a thumbs up there. So
Okay.
I think maybe
They-
they just turned it down.
they can hear me.
Your voice is projecting.
I'd rather not use the mic anyways. So, okay. So again, if we go back to this is an example in another talk that I'm doing, keynote skills. Watch this. Basically, what we want to do is we want to add some of these files to Xcode, and you can do that a few different ways. You can choose the add files. I think there's a copy files to the project option. But in this case, we would just want to drag a few of these files to, again, these files are not what you're going to see. You're going to use the 4 files that are in that the zip file. But essentially, you're just going to drag the file over into the sidebar. Look at that. And again, this is your screen will be slightly different, but I think you get the idea. And once you click Finish there, the file should be added. And in this case, the first file that I added is this constants.swift. And this is where we're essentially going to hard code a method to get the version of, go ahead.
Do I want to configure an Objective-C bridging header?
No, you don't have to do that. Typically, you'd see that if you're adding an Objective-C file to the command line tool, but
I'm adding the files from your source.
yeah, the bridging header basically could allow you to use Objective-C code within the command line tool as well, or import Objective-C frameworks and things like that. But here, basically, what we're doing is we're setting a variable of version to the CF bundle short version string key that's in our bundled info.plist. So this is also how you would do it in a Swift app as well, if you wanted to get the version. And that key there you could replace with whatever you wanted. So sometimes if you wanted to do in your help command, sometimes you can print the copyright if you want to do copyright. There's a key in those bazillion keys in that dropdown for info.plist to add copyright. You can make several of these similar type of strings, but in this case, this version property is going to be set to the version of the app. And we'll show you. I'll show you where that comes in. The next file, this is the Swift or the PSU CLI.swift file. Essentially, you're just going to replace the contents of that PSU CLI.swift file with this. And I'll show you, basically what we're doing here is, again, we had added Swift argument parser to the CLI tool, but we've not yet leveraged it. So in this case, we're going to import argument parser, which is going to essentially allow us to use functionality from Swift argument parser. And when I mentioned the entry point of the app being the main file, in this case, we're now selecting this struct, essentially this portion of the command line tool is now going to be the main. So instead of using the main Swift file, this will now be the main. So this will be the entry point of the command line tool. PSU CLI, typically what we're doing is we're going to configure the command. PSU CLI is the name of the command, so that's what I'm using as the name of the struct here. It conforms to this parsable command. Again, you're going to get an example by the end. Hopefully you have a working command line tool. And we're not necessarily going to be able to learn everything about Swift argument parser or Swift, but you should have a good example. And what you can see here is we're kind of specifying the command name here in this configuration. In your help file, again, it will create one by default, but you can kind of customize that a little bit. So I'm adding an abstract here, a command line tool that you actually made. The version, which essentially is going to allow you to add a -- version flag to the command line tool, we're going to use the version essentially that's in the plist. So instead of saying the version is a string 1.0 here or 1.2 or whatever, as long as we maintain the version in the command line tools, the target kind of section that we looked at, that version will always be up to date, and we don't have to remember to do that somewhere else in the code base, maybe in the constants file or something like that. And then the last section is the subcommands of the command line tool. So I'll give you a few examples. We make a product called, like I mentioned, Electrona Patch. There's a command line tool portion of Patch, and the command is named Patch, right? But a subcommand of Patch is the install subcommand. So you would run patch install something. So another example would be like the defaults command. So the defaults is the command, and read or write would be the subcommand. So we're basically defining subcommands in this section. And those files we're going to create as well. You probably have seen those in the zip file. But this is where you essentially are referencing when someone calls one of these subcommands, what we're going to do. So the first thing that we're going to do is essentially create that logged in user file, which again, you can just drag that over. And again, we're going to be importing argument parser, just like we did in the other one. The next section here, if you remember, or if you kind of copy and paste it a bunch of times, that Python command to get the logged in user, it's actually going to be doing something similar, but we're not leveraging Python in this case. We're going to do it directly in Swift. And this would have worked the whole time. You would have never had an issue where, something broke with that logged in user command. So this is another reason why, doing something like this may be beneficial for you. So you potentially can, not use something that's going to be deprecated or removed from the OS, because again, this would have worked for a long period of time and into the future. That PSU CLI struct that we created in the last file, we're basically going to extend that. So you could encompass all of this within one file. This essentially allows you to break up the sections of your command line tool. I find it really, I don't begrudge Armin for having a 7,000 line script in Installamator, but there's no way I can't digest that. It's super long, and it's a shell script, and that's, typically you wouldn't have, a bunch of different files for one specific shell script. You definitely could. You can source smaller files with functions and things like that, but this makes it super easy for me. I mean, this is like 50 lines, I think, so it's not like something crazy. I like using extensions to just break things up, and it makes it more digestible for me. So this struct that we're creating that also conforms to that parsable command is called logged in user. And if you remember back in the last file that we looked at, we're referencing loggedinuser.self, which is actually this file. And for this subcommand, which we're just going to be calling username, we can set up an abstract specifically for this. So in that help, we can actually perform a PSU CLI username -- help. So we can actually get help related to specifically that subcommand. And again, just this, I mean, if you imagine, if you're familiar with shell, the amount of work that you would have to do to get that is kind of incredible. And this makes it so easy to populate a version for a command. So this next section, we're setting up a flag for the subcommand. So a flag is basically a Boolean value, right? So in terms of an example, I guess, trying to think of something in a normal command line tool that would have a flag like verbose, a verbose flag, right? That's a flag. That's the true or false, a yes or no. You don't have any arguments that you're passing. There's no string that you're passing after it. It's just a yes or no, basically. So we're setting this ID only variable, which is going to be a flag, to false. So what we're going to be able to do with this command is not only get the username of the person who's logged in, but we can also get the ID of them if we choose to do that with a flag. And to add flags or arguments to the subcommand, it's literally that easy. So the next thing we're going to look at is, it's 50 lines of code in its own file. It's not a ton of code. Obviously, it's more than that long-ass command to get the logged in user, but you're going to get a lot more out of this, and you can really build things into this. We talked about doing a CLI tool internally for things like common things that you would do to eliminate things that you just can't remember. Make it easy. So essentially, this command, again, like the Python command that I showed, very similar in how it works. Essentially, what we're doing here is we have a function to get both the currently logged in user and their ID. So we have a function that's basically just getting both. The next section here is we're setting properties that it basically just kind of cut down on the amount of code that we may need to use. We're going to set up one property that's called logged in user that's going to be the currently logged in user's name as a string. If for some reason there isn't somebody logged in, it's just going to return an empty string, which is the question mark is essentially if this particular variable is empty, use an empty string. So that's what we're doing. You could, this could be a few lines, that particular return. You could say if that, get logged in user info dot username is null, then do this or return this, otherwise return this. So this, I like doing it this way. It's just, again, the shorter the code is, the easier it is for me to digest. So that's kind of how I choose to do this. It's again, it's up to you. It's really kind of a preference, but the same thing with this. So this is a ternary statement. Again, essentially what we're doing here is we've got the current logged in user in this function. If the ID only flag is true, if someone set that ID only flag, we're just going to print the logged in user's ID. Otherwise, if the ID only flag is not true, or is false, we didn't set the ID only flag, then we're just going to print the logged in user. Again, this could be 4 or 5 lines of code if you do like a if ID only is true, return, print this, otherwise print this. But this is just a shorter way, again, it's essentially an if statement, but it's referenced as a ternary statement. Any questions on that before we move on?
Have we seen the actual code that gets? Have we seen the actual code that gets the logged in user?
Yeah, that was it. Let me go back. It's essentially the function right above this. That's what's going to get the logged in user.
Because
the line above it. The
SC dynamic store copy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That is actually the system configuration API. There's
System
SC util.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, system configuration framework dynamic store, which is updated based on current conditions on the system, right? There's a static store and a dynamic store for the system configuration framework. The dynamic store is what is updated based on the user that's logged in. What active console session is going on. So we're pulling it out of, based on the active console session, use this framework, get that property from that framework.
Exactly.
Thank you.
And if you somehow remember kind of the current way in Bash that you would get the logged in user, it's using SCUtil. So this is essentially the kind of the API, very likely that SCUtil is using as well. So yeah, again, it's, when we use this, you're going to just do PSU CLI username. That's going to be the command that you're going to run. So we've kind of done all that work on the back end, and it's going to be much more memorable. But yeah. So here we're creating another subcommand. Again, I try to think about kind of things that we could get through in the amount of time. I actually wrote up another subcommand to list running applications, which was also kind of cool. And I was like, you know what, I'm not going to have time to go through that. But it's, again, that's an example of something that you really can't remember how to do it. You may, but parsing the running applications is difficult. But also this Git version, it's kind of unique too. So we're going to see how kind of you can take something that you really can't remember very easily and make it much more memorable. So I skipped kind of a few of the things that we had talked about before, like extending PSU CLI. In this case, the command struct we're initializing is git version here. And this subcommand, I just passed that up. The subcommand name is just git version. So we're going to be able to run PSU CLI git version. So here, we have an argument. So an argument is basically like, if you do an ls command, right? ls command and then some directory. The directory is the argument that you're passing. So this is how you can take in an argument into the subcommand. So instead of having a flag where you have like dash dash whatever, this is basically, we're defining a string that this command line tool is going to take in when you run the git version command. And the string is going to be just a path. It's going to be a path to an application. The idea would be you'd run PSU CLI git version applications Google Chrome, and it'll give you the version to Google Chrome or Spotify or whatever the case may be. And this is the function that will run when somebody runs that subcommand, and this is what we use to get the version. There are a lot of different ways that you could potentially get the version. Again, I'm kind of locking in on this CF bundle short version string because that's kind of the most well-known and kind of the more widely leveraged way to a vendor uses to describe what the version is. But that could be CF bundle version. You could have an argument that you specify what that key is as well. So you could run, you could potentially get the version of Chrome, and you could have a different key that you pass in. In this case, we're hard coding it to CF bundle short version string, which works most of the time. We're just setting a few constants here to make, again, things a little bit shorter as we go. I have kind of a limited amount of width that we're showing here, and I'm probably just all up in your way. I apologize. But yeah, that key, we're defining a CF bundle short version string, which we'll use down below. How dare you? And basically, when we run this command, we want to do a few checks, right? So the first check that we're doing is we're trying to make sure that path that the user passed in as an argument actually exists. So we can use File Manager to determine if that file actually exists, because if it doesn't exist, obviously we can't read the info.plist of that particular path. And then actually, if I go back, if for some reason we're using a guard statement here, so it's kind of like a reverse if statement. Basically, what you can do with a guard is meant to if something does or does not, if some condition, in this case, the path doesn't exist, we need to bail out. We need to do something, and then we're done. You can't actually move past a guard statement if you fall into the guard statement. It's required for you to either exit, is what I'm doing in this case, or return, basically finish the function. So if we fall into this guard statement, we're definitely not going to move past this. And what I'm doing here is actually printing to, instead of using a print command, which would print to standard out, this should print to standard error. Kind of not necessary, but really what you should be doing. And in this case, I'm exiting as 1. So we're using Darwin, which we essentially import with the foundation library, and we're going to exit 1 in this case. So here, basically what we're going to do is we're going to get the application that we pass in, we're going to create a bundle out of that. So we can initialize what's called a bundle, and in that bundle, we can kind of reference different properties pretty easily. So if we can't create a bundle from that path, then we're going to error out then. And in this case, we're going to error with a different exit code. So you'll know, okay, if there's a particular error and we exit with 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever the case may be, you can kind of know what's happening without needing to know what the standard error is. In this next section, basically, where the key property that we define up above, we're basically trying to set the version to that particular key. And if we can't do that, so for example, if that CF bundle short version string doesn't actually exist in the info.plist, then we'll error out then in that case. And that will be exit 3. So again, because if you fall into these guard statements, you can't move past it, we know that by the end of this, we've set that version string to something, and we can just print the version. So basically what we have for that logged in user command is we went from that to that. So the second example is something you for sure can remember. You don't have to reference some other script. You can, again, if you are doing something in Jamf Pro or whatever the case may be, this is something that's super easy. You're never going to forget that. And if you do, maybe coffee or something. But yeah, this is the idea, right? So, when you write a shell script, you're using, the whole thing is command line tools. You're leveraging command line tools throughout the whole script. And in some cases, like the top example, you're taking output from some command line tool and parsing it, taking a certain column out of the field. Yeah, you for sure can do it. It's one line versus one line, but you can see the difference is pretty drastic. And as you add more features to this command line tool, when you have a situation where you're managing 100 scripts in Jamf Pro, to be in a situation where you can replace real long lines that you for sure cannot remember with something that you actually control. Again, you don't have to worry about Python being gone in a month or next year or whatever the case may be. It's very powerful. Questions? And I'm going to show, yes, Rob.
Not so much a question, but comment. Like, this is so great. I love the idea because I'm sure everyone that's written a script has something that they put in almost every script. Boilerplate, right? That's what it usually is referred to as. So the things that I'm thinking of are, I always have a whole section for logging. I always have a whole section for the URLs for the Jamf API. I always have a whole section for getting the logged in user. All of the directories on the host that I'm going to be talking to. So all of those things could be added to this. Awesome. Such a cool idea.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I mean, you could do it's kind of endless what you can do. Say things like where, as you know, we've talked about this, JQ, command line tool JQ is incredible. Parse JSON. You could define, if you have some sort of JSON file that you know the structure of, you can create a model of that JSON file, and you can use something like this to parse that output. Rather than installing something like JQ across your fleet, you can embed it in the command line tool that's for your organization, and again, pull out some specific key of that JSON or something. The possibilities are really endless. And I'm also going to show you this working. If for some reason it doesn't work for anybody, does anybody get it to work? Yes. Hey, it does work. But yeah, I'll show you an example. I'll just do that now. Let's see. So you probably could do a whole talk on taking the product and packaging it or making it into a DMG in terms of kind of time. That's, again, there's a lot of different ways to do that. The way that I like to, do that is usually I archive that product, and in the archive process, I would have some sort of a script that would run that would take the output of Xcode, the archive, which contains typically the files, and could create a package out of that. And then we could, during that process, you could sign the package. You could even do this in Xcode Cloud, so you don't have to do it locally. You could build an Xcode Cloud and create a package, and then the artifact of that build process could be your signed, notarized package, and then you could get that package and deploy it with your MDM or however you want to do it. But in this case, I kind of just manually copied this to user local bin. So we do.
Not Mary.
Oh.
You got this man.
Sharing Keynote instead of the screen, bro.
Oh, is it?
Yep.
There we go. We'll do it live. So yeah, if I do a which PSU CLI, you can see I've just put this in user local bin. You could put it wherever you want. This is in path. This is pretty typical. So if we do PSU CLI with no commands, right? It gives you a help. So again, what I talked about with building out your help in like a bash script, to get this, you'd basically create just a long string and you'd have to maintain that. Every time you add a subcommand or want to change the help, you have to remember, okay, now I need to go and adjust this long string, which, if you look at erase install, for instance, at least when I was last time I browsed, it had a huge string that would print out to give you the commands. In this case, it's essentially automatically created using Swift Argument Parser, which is pretty cool. And again, we could do PSU CLI help if we want to. Gives you that. To get the version, again, PSU CLI version. And again, this is not some random variable that's hard-coded in the code base. This is using a method that I think Apple would rather you have. And I think, again, embedding the info.plist in the command line tool, it's just cool. It's kind of I'm a real details type of guy, and if I forgot to update that version variable, it'd be a problem for me. So this is just a cool way to do it, in my opinion. But again, kind of what we made this for, PSU CLI username, Ryan. Let's see if this works. ID only. Whoops. And again, with Swift Argument Parser, you get errors when you mess something up. It even tells you, did you mean this particular command or this particular flag? So there's the ID. So again, typically what I would do in a bash script is I'd have that logged in user command, which again, you're not going to remember, and then you'd use ID of that particular logged in user variable to get the ID. In this case, we have a cool option to get that as well. The other thing is PSU CLI, what was it, get version, and let's go Chrome. There's the version of Chrome. And again, because that CF bundle short version string is pretty standardly used, could be Spotify. What else? Let's see. Visual Studio Code. So again, you could do this with oh,
Got the S on defaults.
you could do that, but that's not that difficult. But you can forget the S in defaults, right? So yeah, this is the idea, right? To do things that you commonly, I mean, think about like all the extension attributes that if you use Jamf Pro, that you essentially are doing the same thing, for some random app. It could be something that's not in the applications or system applications folder.
I have a really basic question.
Yeah.
So I can, really basic. So it builds an Xcode. I have no idea where the actual command line tool is.
Yeah.
Am I missing a step?
So what you want to do is, if you go to, again, you didn't miss a step. It's just, there's a lot of different ways to do that, and that part is kind of complicated too. That's where I was mentioning how you could, and I can probably by memory tell you what to do. If you go to Product menu in the menu bar, and then go to Archive, and then, I don't know exactly what comes next in that. I think, yeah, here, let's see.
Are you trying to find where the artifact is in the file system after you run build?
I want to be able to move it to my user local
If you
bin
want
folder.
the
to
quick
be
and
able to
dirty
run
way
the
would be go to
binary.
Product and then show build folder location, and then you could just, that should take you to the debuggable version of the command. That's not what you'd want to use. That's not what you'd want to distribute. What you'd want to distribute is what you get when you use the archive function, because that's a release version of the command line tool. But if you just want to play around like we're doing here, if you just go to Product in the menu bar, show build folder location, I think is the option. It'll take you right to where that debug version of the command line tool is. And under the Products folder, you should see PSU CLI. And you could just take that and drag that into terminal, and then start running your commands based off that. Did that work for you?
It looks like it.
Cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, again, that's starting out. You may go, oh, this is the command line tool. I'm going to now try to package this up. You really don't want to do that because likely it could be not signed based on how you've set up your Xcode project. You want to do an archive, and that archive should have the command line tool. And again, typically during that archive process, what I do is I create a post install or a post archive action that could create a package and sign it. But yeah, that should give you two different ways to get that.
Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Any other questions? Let's see if I can do this here. So yeah, that be me there. Again, apologies for not being related to a bunch of stuff about Patch, but we kind of talked a little bit about Patch, and yeah, we're really big on things like command line tools and things like that. It makes it, in my eyes, something that you control, something that you can manage, something that you own it. So you don't have to leverage some long command that you're not going to remember again. And there's a ton of things you can do with it. So if you have any questions, after this particular link here, we'll have the slides. Obviously, I think Gretchen is going to distribute the slides too. There's feedback there if you want to tell me how terrible I did on this. I really appreciate everybody showing up. And I'm gonna have. I feel bad about promoting my next talk, which is at 10:45, because if you go to my next talk, that means you're not going to Chad's talk because they're at the same time.
But you should go to Ryan's talk. If you like this stuff, you should definitely go to Ryan's talk. If this was like the worst thing in the world for you, then you can come and
Exactly.
watch my profoundly less serious talk.
But yeah, you should.
Through on Swift UI, I think I'm upset I'm not going to be able to see it until it comes out on video.
Well, yeah, you just wait a month and maybe you can watch it then. But again, I really appreciate everybody showing up. If you have questions, if you didn't, like me, I may not want to ask questions like during the thing. You can hit me up on Slack, see me in the hallway, ask me a question. Yeah, happy to help out where I can and give anybody information if they have any. And that's it. You got a little bit of time. You can get a drink, take a bio break, whatever you want. Yeah. Thanks, everybody.